Which important skill is slowly fading? Story 1. Working with your hands is being seen as an antiquated vintage hobby. My dude, that's the best way to form new neural pathways in your brain. Story 2. Mental stamina, concentrating on mundane tasks for a prolonged period, such as studying or solving complex problems. Story 3. Basic computer skills, typing and being able to find files on a computer. I teach freshmen, and I'm amazed at how few of them are comfortable typing on a physical keyboard. And I'm teaching the generation I thought would blow me away with their tech skills, how to save and relocate a file. It's bizarre. Story 4. Most of the skills that will actually help with the post-apocalypse. Guns are great and all, but hypothermia is a B when your sleeping bag is torn and you can't fix it because no one in your hunting party can sew. Answer: duct tape is unironically the better way of fixing stuff like camping equipment if you need it to retain its functionality, i.e. waterproofing, insulation, flexibility, durability. Luckily, we'll probably not have to worry much about hypothermia with the climate going this way. More like potable water and staph infections and various tropical climate parasites making their way further north. Story 5. Spelling and grammar. The amount of memes and posts I've seen just on Reddit with spelling or grammar mistakes continues to become more and more common. Granted, a lot of people don't have English as their first language, which is fine, but I'm convinced some people use that as a cover for their poor spelling. Answer: I agree completely. It's interesting to note that as recently as the 1960s-70s, authors, fiction and nonfiction, could still be fairly considered, at least to some degree, to be celebrities, appearing on popular late-night talk shows along with movie and television stars. This rarely happens now because overall, fewer people read books, and that tends to correlate with a decline in the ability to use, or even be aware of what constitutes, correct spelling and grammar. As you text, email friends and family members day by day, all of this, of course, doesn't really matter, but in any type of professional setting, or dare I say, even on Reddit, people will likely assign less value to communications featuring glaring spelling errors and incorrect grammar. Story 6. How to exist without constant stimulation. We've completely forgotten how to cope with being bored, have time to just sit and think. That's why there's all this talk around mindfulness as an intentional practice. We used to do it multiple times a day, on the bus, walking the dog, etc., but now every single moment of our lives is spent with some sort of stimulation. Podcasts, music, scrolling social media, etc. We've forgotten how to just be without colors, lights, and sounds flashing in our faces constantly. Story 7. Hand drafting. Sure, maybe not an important skill because computers do it better, but I do think it'll be a cherished lost art. Story 8. Fact-checking. The fact that we had a VP candidate that wasn't laughed off stage when he said, "I thought there would be no fact-checking" during a debate is insane to me. I debated in high school. If I insisted on no fact-checking, they would have rightfully booted my jerk out of there. Story 9. I don't know about y'all, but my handwriting sucks nowadays, probably due to almost exclusively typing for years. Story 10. Many artisanal skills for making or repairing things, like repairing clocks, watches, pots, pans, umbrellas, blacksmithing, leather working, traditional carpentry. Story 11. Spell check and grammar. All you need to do is Google loose or lose to figure out the correct word to lose weight, not lose weight. Story 12. Listening. In the military, this was my greatest learned skill. Folks are too fast to react or interject, Just sit back and let the conversation flow. You'll know when it is time to contribute to the dialogue. If it feels wrong or uncomfortable to say something, even in the slightest way, hold your tongue. People will respect your restraint and input when it's timely. Discipline is key. Story 13. Researching. Too many people take things at face value and accept things being said to them too easily as truth. Misinfo is this generation's greatest problem. Story 14. Navigating. If I plop you magically into a desert right now, can you figure out where you are on Earth? Like at least the hemisphere. Can you find the north, east, south, and west? Can you derive a plan of action in which direction to go from these informations on the world map in your mind? Alternatively, what strategy would you use to locally find humans to help you? My niece can start YouTube videos of Peppa the Pig, but can't find back home from the end of the street. Story 15. How to drive a car with a manual transmission. When I was learning to drive in the early 70s, a lot of cars had a stick or three on the tree. Story 16. Critical thinking, skeptical inquiry, self-awareness, intellectual and moral accountability, all going down the drain. Story 17. Reading comprehension, media literacy, empathy, critical thinking, maintaining sustained or focused attention, self-examination, grace, in the sense of courteous goodwill, too many fudge things to count. Story 18. The ability to tolerate mild discomfort. Sometimes, as adults, we have to do things we don't like. Seems like a lost art with everyone refusing to tolerate anything that even mildly goes away they don't want. Story 19. Computer literacy. I'm 21, and I remember having it drilled into my head to be careful on the internet. Don't click sketchy links. Be careful with your info, basic stuff. I just had to basically factory reset my 14 Yo Brothers PC because there was just so much malware. Story 20. Active empathy, humanism, solidarity in the sense of activism. Overlooked as a rare skill as it involves so much effort and abnegation without any personal gain, and imposes a strong resilience facing repeated defeats and opposition. It is not fading because of a lack of need or interest, but because of a recent active trend to antagonize those principles worldwide. Story 21. Reasoning and learning. The ability to Google or use AI to ask and get an immediate answer is eliminate the skill of patience and deductive reasoning needed to truly understand something. What I see happening is people are getting into situations where they cannot solve new problems they face because they haven't solved problems on their own in the past. Reasoning and learning are compounding through our lifetimes. Story 22. The ability to actually have meaningful discussion debates without someone going straight to Google to look at facts. It seems like the concept of integrity is slowly failing away unless you're able to quick trigger the internet to support your points. Story 23. Critical thinking. The ability to see through scams, learned mind from RuneScape. Also, the ability to read people in general. Story 24. Critical thinking. People come to rely on AI-generated slop more than their own ability to research a topic and arrive at a nuanced conclusion. Social media has enabled us to isolate ourselves from anyone who doesn't think like us, and algorithms put us on pathways towards dangerous radicalization. People actively seek out relationships and situations to turn their brains off and reinforce existing biases. We no longer trust experts, but pundits who already agree with us. The current political climate in the US is antithetical to anything academic, anti-anything which goes against any established narrative. We're so accustomed to our own comfort that we find other adults threatening. We demonize and pay wall human connection. People are so unfamiliar with the world that they live in that anything which they don't immediately recognize is proof of some far-fetched conspiracy or aliens. People are proud of their willful ignorance, their belligerence. How long until we're watering plants with Gatorade because it has electrolytes? Story 25. Land navigation. When the lights go out, most of you are screwed without knowing how to use a map compass. Story 26. Cursive. The ability to be handy with tools to work on anything that's yours, from minor plumbing around the house to a starter on a car, homemade cooking. Story 27. Was hoping to learn something, but got the usual sea of replies like thinking and compassion, each with 100 updoots. Story 28. Real-life human social interactions. We literally have an entire generation of people afraid to answer their door or phone. I know people that would rather die than answer their phone. Story 29. People fighting back against injustices. People generally don't do anything and accept it. The most people will do is stand outside with a sign, knowing it won't change a thing. Story 30. The ability to write with proper punctuation, something resembling grammar and spelling. Most high school kids I know can't spell simple words like because. Also, the ability to read at grade level. Most kids are unable to read the materials presented without modification. Story 31. Navigation. People can't find their way without their phone or nav system telling them where to make a turn. And I get it. In some American suburbs that all look the same, but in Europe, go to the big church, find your way from there. Story 32. The ability to do open surgery. Seems obscure, but it's a big deal. I am having to operate more and more on patients where the index surgeon could not proceed safely and left the problem more complicated to be addressed later. Story 33. I'm not sure this is an important skill, but I think the ability to handle, utilize, and understand any form of physical media, be it VHS, videocassettes, CDs, DVDs, and Blu-rays, is diminishing thanks to streaming services dominating the TV and movie space. Story 34. The ability to run a manual lathe or mill. Everyone teaches CNC work, but the skill needed to trig out a part and machine something correctly by hand is needed, especially for tooling in the aircraft industry. Story 35. Situational awareness. Where are you in space and time? This applies to driving in traffic, conversations, listening, flying aircraft, texting while walking, dispensing advice, voting, cutting down trees, toxic relationship, abuse, etc. Ties in with critical thinking, which is in decline, but I am astonished how many people are completely unaware of their surroundings. Story 36. A concentration span that is longer than a couple of minutes, along with the ability to sit and have a conversation without the other person picking up their phone after every peep. Story 37. Reading, critical thinking, organizing thoughts and ideas into coherent arguments, assessing facts and reevaluating assumptions. Story 38. Typing. Somehow I managed to never learn how to type very fast, despite being at least average intelligence. I just started a new job and all my new co-workers judge me for typing slow. But with predictive text, voice-to-text, etc., I don't need to type fast anymore. It's becoming an outdated skill. Story 39. Reading cursive. I'm going through the process of getting citizenship by descent and by God. I've had to call my grandmother so many times to make out what is written in these old documents. I am not proud of this. Story 40. I put 2 quarters, 3 dimes, and a nickel in front of every kid in the 6th grade class I teach. One kid could tell me how much money it was. Story 41. Media literacy. Back in my day, it was part of our basic language education to analyze media, look for intentions and meanings that weren't immediately clear, be aware of the way media could affect you, and be critical of any claims that didn't have solid support. Today, people take things at face value, seem to trust even the shadiest sources if they support their own beliefs, go for blatantly on-the-nose exposition, and can't deal with nuance. Story 42. Language in general, reading, writing, grammar, etc., and I'm not even talking about the English language. Story 43. I think critical thinking is on a downward trend, and that terrifies me. We live in a world where no matter what crazy bullshit you believe, you can find a community of people who hold the same belief. Also, the ability to tolerate opinions that do not match your own. That one is terrifying too. Story 44. Empathy. Of course, you can have it or not have it, but you can also encourage it and grow it and develop it, and we just don't seem to do that as often as we should be doing it. Story 45. Critical thinking discernment. The ability to analyze information, question sources, hold multiple perspectives in your head, and not just react emotionally or jump on bandwagons. Story 46. Blacksmithing and farrier. We actually have a local blacksmith, and I now have the best farrier for my horse. However, he lives out of state. Story 47. I don't know if this can be considered a skill, but people's attention span has been greatly declining. I just tried to skip a 10-second ad on YouTube. Story 48. Resourcefulness. Being able to shoot out without the help of ChatGPT or Google's first page. I work in staffing, and I'm seeing all the time people who come to me to help them find jobs, but can't research by themselves at all how to write a resume. I have to do 90 of the job for them. It's infuriating how little mental independence or initiative to search knowledge they have. I can't understand how there's people that live like this. Story 49. Calling someone on the telephone. Young people at work are scared of phoning people, and I try to tell them if you've got more than one question, it's always going to be quicker than email or text. It drives me nuts that everyone walks around with a smartphone, but they spend their time texting on a tiny screen. It's using the wrong tool for the job. I'm old, aren't I? Story 50. Constructive debate conversation between friends, family, or in any professional environments, like Parliament. Story 51. The ability to have good faith, open-minded discussions with people of alternative views. We self-isolate and surround ourselves in echo chambers. When we eventually do have discussions with people, we talk the way Trump debates. Story 52. Figuring things out, knowing where to get the necessary information or tools or parts for a thing and then doing the thing. Boredom tolerance. Everyone is constantly engaged today. There's no opportunity to be bored, and thus creative. We used to be able to entertain ourselves. Remember when we'd play with a stick for hours, or just climb trees and build forts? Story 53. Driving a manual transmission vehicle. I learned late 80s. Is stick shift even an option anymore? All new vehicles seem to be automatic now. Story 54. The ability to speak to someone face to face and not be creepy. People remember me because I thank them. I'm nice. I don't cause problems. I know and ask about them and never criticize what they're doing. A few of my favorite waitresses, my father always said weird shoot too and pestered them. He passed a month ago or so, and since then, I've learned so much about them. One is a real estate agent in the side and has sold a dozen houses in the area. She's 19. My father always asked, you going to school? Yes. Very, very boomer age. And always said, well, what are you going to do to feed yourself after? If... He didn't agree with their degree choice. I had her talking and smiling the entire time, and they come to me more. I get better service. Just be nice, not creepy. And don't inconvenience people. 3 things that will get you so much free stuff, good service, and better, happier friends. Story 55. I think cursive writing. A lot of documents still ask for signatures, which is usually written in cursive, no? Story 56. Self-awareness. People are so self-absorbed, have no care or consideration for the people around them. Blocking a street corner, watching TikToks on their phone at full volume with no headphones. Story 57. Problem solving. The answer to most problems you can Google. With AI, you can even formulate a specific solution. Story 58. IMO, the most important skills in life are 1. Communication, listening, reading, speaking, and writing. 2. Critical thinking, allows one to operationalize the above. 3. Problem solving, allows one to work with limited or insufficient information to leverage a desired result. Story 59. Knowledge of history, science, geography, biology, and handwriting. PPL get too digital and lose the touch for physical stuff in the world. They have no connection for the nature anymore. They shoot themselves when they see a honeybee and want to eliminate it. It makes me angry and sad. I am 35 years old and a gamer, so I spend a lot of time in front of my PC. But honestly, I dislike the PPL nowadays, which has zero respect to nature and old arts. Story 60. Written communication. I know so many people with degrees who can't even write a basic email anymore without using ChatGPT. Story 61. Googling. Pre-chewed results from ChatGPT are faster and easier, so I don't really blame them. I believe Gen A will never develop proper Googling skills. Story 62. Evolving your critical thinking, research, and comparison abilities. AI is taking over with just one prompt. Story 63. Phonics and teaching cursive. I remember when I was in elementary school, our teachers put such a heavy emphasis on learning phonics and writing in cursive. Nowadays, teachers don't even have time to teach that kind of stuff because they're trying to get the kid to comprehend grade-level information that they're clearly not understanding because they're academically behind. Story 64. Probably hasn't been slowly fading, but basic sewing. Being able to repair a hem or seam, reinforce a button or snap, add a snap to neckline. Even on the cheap clothing available today, this comes in handy. You can keep things out of the landfill if you can, so a small repair on them. I work with some much younger people, and one of them said they have no idea how to sew on a button. Story 65. Minor stitching and basic home gardening. Imagine we have the capacity of growing basic veggies at home, but we prefer Blinkit. Story 66. IMO, bookbinding, blacksmithing, being able to read-write in shorthand, and, as others mentioned, cursive. Story 67. A lot of basic knowledge, simple clothing making and repair techniques, basic woodworking, plumbing repair, car maintenance and repair, food gardening, etc. There's a lot of lost self-sustenance knowledge between my great-grandparents' generation and my own, millennial, and I think it's worse for folks younger than me. And I'm not saying I have a handle on all of this either. I'm actively realizing it as I try to transition away from being less reliant on the consumer system. It's hard to miss how many problems are most commonly solved with money once you notice it. And the fact is, we're partly here because it's actually cheaper to buy than make or fix, which certainly incentivizes that skill loss. Story 68. Being able to give coherent directions. Real story. Let's all go to Burger Place. Which one? There's more than one? Yes. Where is the one you want to go to? The close one. There are two that are equally close. The one on Street A or Street B? East or west? I point. That way or this way? The close one, the one we always go to. We just changed which one we usually go to after the new one opened. Do you want the new one or the old one? Why can't you just put it in Google? I know where they all are. I need you to tell me which one you want to go to. The close one. I later found out that they went to the furthest possible location, which wasn't either of the close ones. Story 69. Touch typing. Courses in this disappeared from schools in the last 10 years. Hunt and Peck has slowed town typing for younger groups, such that 10-page zero-apers are a real struggle. Story 70. Reasoning. Too many people are being spoon-fed incorrect information and then being told how to think about it. Fewer people are actually doing critical analysis of the information they get and not using basic reason to determine if the shoot they are hearing is true or even real. Story 71. Most trade skills. Most good tradespeople I know are over 50, and some trades don't really have anyone under 50 at all. In my niche, I was the only person under 50 when I started in my 20s, and when I retired a few years ago, I was still one of the youngest people, mid-40s. Story 72. Defensive driving. As far as I can tell, it's being replaced with, "Fudge you, I have a pickup truck." What the fudge are you going to do about it? Driving. Story 73. Stenography. One of the only jobs currently where the need is still growing, but the actual supply of skilled courtroom stenographers is just not enough to keep up with the demand. From the research I've done, it seems to be one of those jobs that could be taken by AI in the future, but currently still requires human input since technology isn't there yet. Story 74. Memory. I'm a researcher and I work with younger researchers. When we do a literature review, they can't remember the stuff they read yesterday. It's so easy to look stuff up, they don't bother to remember anything for more than 5 minutes. They don't know how to rehearse information to put it in long-term memory. Then they can't put it all together. They can't synthesize the information. They definitely can't tell you, I read 10 studies on topic X, and 8 of them consistently found Y. They are at a terrible disadvantage. They know the last thing they read, and that's all. These are highly intelligent people, and they can't remember anything. Story 75. Stitching tailoring. The only people I see doing it are either really old or involved in fashion. But being able to hem pants, fix a broken drawstring, stitch a button, alter the sleeve of a jacket, etc. is useful. Anyone can learn the basics with a 5 sewing kit and a few minutes. Story 76. Skilled craftsmen. We are getting a ton of unskilled labor and a ton of people with college degrees. But those artisan craftsmen in between are becoming rarer and rarer. Finding someone to do fancy or difficult trade work is becoming increasingly difficult, and anyone trying to fill this void will probably be doing very well for themselves in the future. Story 77. Living with nature, reading the weather from the sky, knowing where to go, orientating without Google Maps, staying concentrated for longer than 20 sec. Story 78. Conversational comprehension if it's not a simple yes, no, or a sentence that has a vocab that a fifth grader or lower has. Most people go, huh, what does that mean? It's also not just the TikTok generation. Story 79. Analog electrical dot engineering. The last of the folks that have been doing it forever are retired or retiring, and it's just really not taught anymore. Story 80. Honestly, I read an article recently that said that younger generations have trouble looking things up via an index and skimming text, i.e., looking things up in the dictionary rather than using the search bar. Story 81. Social skills, the art of holding an interesting conversation, engaging with who you're talking to with. Story 82. Basic knowledge of how vehicles work. People can't even put on their own spare tires or know how to put on wiper blades. Story 83. Aging industrial automation management. There are so many old businesses and factories that would cease operating if not for an old rat's nest of a PLC cabinet that's been operating nonstop since 1982, and the last person who knew how to fix or modify anything retired 20 years ago, and if it breaks, it's going to cost $300,000 and 3 weeks of downtime to replace it all and get it working again. Story 84. Cultural diversity understanding. Reddit is such a one-cultured monolith that we're getting more rigged and unchanging in our views. We never have to acknowledge other cultures' viewpoints because the Reddit majority is always the right. And that causes people to be very extreme in their expectations of people of different cultures. I think sometimes we don't need to be super aware of how other people live their lives. If they want to live like that, freedom to them. If they're not hurting anyone, they're free to express that stance or that opinion without the moralizing of hegemonic Reddit. Story 85. Navigation within cities. Nowadays, we go everywhere with the Maps app. My city is a mess in terms of city planning, and yet my father moved here long after he was an adult, know exactly where they're going and where big streets meet, and how to orient themselves. My generation doesn't. We love outside the city, but still, and even on the highway going to other places of the country. I was coming back from a day trip in February and my phone died. Turns out it ain't hard at all, we just have to pay attention. Makes the trip go by more pleasantly when you're not always checking your phone. To see how much more you got till you get there. Story 86. All of the soft skills. I thought they were lying when they told us that was